this is done on Saturday and Sunday, and it's done for Western time zone and for Eastern time zone. Eastern being Asia, and Western being Western Europe and North and South America.
Yes.
So, yeah, there's a great program there for people who are interested in participating in a group meditation that is time coordinated globally. It happens every weekend on Saturday and Sunday.
Nice, very nice. It's beautiful.
It's pretty easy to find. It's right on the homepage. There's a link to it.
Now, what would you say are the hazards of forcing a practice?
Many.
Going out of control.
Yeah. First of all, if you're forcing the practice, as far as AYP is concerned, you're not doing the practice.
Yes.
Because part of the practice is to be very easy and favor the procedure of the technique for whatever practice you're doing over other things that come up. So, forcing the practice is a fairly common thing in the beginning. So I shouldn't be too hard on it, because when we learn a new practice, we're always going to go through a sort of an adjustment stage when we're getting started, and we may be like using our mantra like a sledgehammer in the beginning, rather than just easily letting it refine as we pick it up in the mind and favoring it over thoughts and sensations that may be coming up as a result of purification that's going on. So, but if we take an attitude that we're going to pound our way to enlightenment, and we take that beyond the initial learning stages, and we make a lifetime habit of it,
yes,
it's not going to work. With the energy cultivation practices like pranayama and mudras and bandhas and some of the combinations of those things, if we force those things and do them for a long time, long sessions, we can get in very serious trouble with Kundalini, with a premature awakening that can lead to a lot of discomfort,
yes,
and a lot of grief and a long period of recovery. Now, that's not a danger for people who follow the procedures and become well-versed in self-pacing, which is a very important category of practice in AYP that sort of underlies all the practices, is learning how to self-pace our practice, which just means not overdoing and knowing when to back off a bit when we're having excessive purification going on, if we're having some irritability in activity or too much energy. We have a very well-developed system of self-pacing that covers all of the practices. So forcing is not good.
No, not good. And self-pacing is a really important part of this practice altogether.
Very important.
Now, what about teaching children some of these techniques? Do you suggest that that's a good idea to use the practices with children?
I think very limited for young children. I think very young children, it's okay to do some alternate nostril breathing and certainly some postures, but not really mantra meditation until they get well up into their later teens, or at least early teens. Say 12, 13, 14 years old. That's fine to begin very light sessions of mantra meditation, but getting into cultivating ecstatic conductivity with spinal breathing, mudras, bandhas, and some more intense things that we have, definitely not before 18, or later. You have to consider that the awakening of ecstatic conductivity in the nervous system is a kind of a second puberty, because really what's happening there is your sexual energy is expanding up into the body, preferably through the spinal nerve, and then expanding out from there. And it is, many people who have experienced this kind of awakening find that it is very much related to sexual energy. It's very much a transformation that takes some time to get used to. and we can handle all of that. But if you take a child who's 10 or 12 years old, or even especially early teens when puberty is in full bloom, normal puberty, we don't want to overlay another puberty on top of that. That could be very destabilizing.
Yes.
You know,
absolutely.
I remember, I don't know if I remember, but I've seen pictures of myself when I was 14, and I looked like I was in total agony all the time. And I think that's true of so many young teenagers, just to get through that normal puberty. And to lay the awakening of static conductivity on top of that, I do not think is wise. So, but little asanas, little alternate nostril breathing, certainly good to be around the knowledge, definitely. And there's always going to be a prodigy popping up here and there, and you just will not be able to say no. They'll be sitting there with their eyes closed, meditating just naturally. And it's in that sense, there is a certain amount of case-by-case consideration for your children, but in general, you don't want to push them too fast.
Okay. Now,
and most of them, if you do teach them, they're not going to stick with it anyway. But if the exposure is done in a good way, then later in life, they will come back to it. But if you kind of shove it down their throat, and if they have a bad experience, you could lose them for lifetimes. And
yes.
We definitely don't want to be doing that.
Can you share with us some of the Enlightenment milestones that we can look out for?
Yeah, in AYP, we kind of, like everything else, we try and keep it simple. We basically have 3 Enlightenment milestones, and they'll sound very familiar because we've already discussed these things. The first one is the rise and stabilization of abiding inner silence, which is that stillness we experience when we meditate. It's that samadhi that Patanjali talks about in his 8 limbs, and it's a state of inner silence. It's also a state of self-radiating bliss. And when it becomes abiding, we come to know it as eternal because it's always there. It's said that we take it with us when we leave the body, and I can't really verify that for you yet. but it's certainly worth having during this life, and it makes the whole process better from start to finish. So that's the first stage, is the cultivation of abiding inner silence. And as a milestone, we don't set goals in AYP. I mean, we have big discussions about this in the community. Well, who's enlightened and who's at this stage and who's at that stage. And that's really not what it's about, because as soon as you get attached to a stage, you're creating an obstacle, a mental obstacle. And it's in your head, Well,
yes.
Abiding inner silence, that's what I am. That's what I have to have. And that can become an obstacle. So we really view it as a milestone, which is something we move past or through. So as we're moving through inner silence, or having abiding inner silence, the second milestone, which can be happening at the same time or even before, is what we call ecstatic conductivity, which is really getting into that 4th limb of yoga, 5th limb of yoga, which is pratyahara, which is the introversion of sensory perception. And so when we're having ecstatic conductivity coming up, we're beginning to see things from a much deeper level, a more ecstatic level, a more divine level. And our sensory perception is becoming introverted inside. In fact, the title of the spinal breathing book, the subtitle of it, is Journey to Inner Space, which really reflects that process of ecstatic conductivity and the refinement of sensory perception to the inner realm. And then we begin to see everything on the outside as having that sort of radiance, that sort of ecstatic quality. So that's the second milestone. And then the third one we call unity, which is the joining of the first 2.